The sky above the alien capital was black with smoke and the ground. Shook with the distant roar of explosions, Captain Varen stood on the edge of a shattered balcony, his translator device clicking softly in his ear while he watched the strange figures moving through the fire. He had been in the study of war for most of his life. He had read the accounts of ancient battles between worlds, studied the tactics of great commanders, and lectured at the Alliance War Academy on the science of victory. He believed nothing in the galaxy could surprise him, not until he saw the humans fight. They were small compared to many soldiers in the Alliance, their armor scratched and dented from previous battles. Their weapons were not sleek or elegant, but heavy and loud. They advanced through the ruined streets like they owned them, moving from shadow to shadow. Their boots splashed through pools of water mixed with ash, and yet they did not slow. They ignored the enemy fire that scorched the walls. Beside them, they were not afraid. They were not careful. They were something else entirely. Varen had no word for it. The local defenders had set up what was meant to be a perfect trap. Tall barricades blocked every road-ahead machine, turrets aimed down the streets, snipers hid in the windows above. The defenders had the high ground and the advantage of numbers. Varen could almost hear his academy instructor saying no force could break such a formation in open daylight, but the humans did. Not even pause to consider it. They spread out in pairs, one group drawing the defenders' fire while the others slipped into side alleys. They moved as if they could smell the weak points in the enemy line, one human carrying a strange cylindrical device charged forward without cover enemy. Shots cracked through the air, but he ran faster each step, pounding against the broken pavement. He slid behind a collapsed wall, pulled the pin on the cylinder, and rolled it into the street. The blast that followed was not large, but it filled the air with smoke, thick and choking. The defenders opened fire wildly, but their shots went nowhere. In that moment, the rest of the humans appeared through the haze like ghosts. Their weapons spat light and sound, so violently that Varen's ears rang even from a distance. The defenders broke first. They tried to fall back, but the humans were already behind them, cutting off escape. Varen saw one soldier use nothing but a length of wire to bring down a larger enemy, dragging him into the shadows. Another tossed a small round object into an upper window. The flash lit up the street, and the sniper fire stopped instantly. Every move was quick, brutal, and without hesitation. Varen realized they were not simply fighting to win, they were fighting to dominate every breath of the battlefield. They seemed to sense what their enemies feared most. And then they became that fear. If the enemy hid behind walls, the humans broke the walls. If the enemy took the high ground, the humans climbed higher. If the enemy expected them to hold position, the humans charged straight in. The more resistance they faced, the faster they moved, and the harder they struck. It was as if the danger only made them stronger. By the time the last defender fell, the street was silent, except for the crackle of flames and the distant hum of Alliance medical drones. Varen stepped down from the balcony, his boots crunching over broken glass. He had seen victory before, but this was different. This was not the slow, measured kind of triumph taught in war academies. This was raw, unpredictable, and terrifying. He wondered if the humans had a word for it, and if they did, he was not sure. He wanted to know. As he moved closer, one of the human soldiers noticed him. The soldier's helmet visor was scratched, his armor burned in places. He walked toward Varen slowly until they were face to face. Varen's translator clicked, and the soldier's voice came through, deep and calm. "You haven't seen anything yet, then?" Without waiting for a reply, the soldier turned and joined his unit, disappearing into the smoke. Varen stood frozen, replaying the words over and over. He felt a weight in them, not as a threat, but as a promise. He had come to the front lines to record history, to observe and document the way humans fought their first war among the stars. What he had just witnessed was beyond anything he could have imagined. This was not the calculated chess match of alien generals. This was something older, something that lived in the bones and blood of these strange creatures from Earth somewhere. Deep in the capital, another explosion shook the ground, and the humans moved toward it without hesitation. Varen followed. At a distance, his recorder active every step he took. He wondered how far they could go and how much more the galaxy had yet to see. If this was only the beginning, then he feared what the end might look like. And yet he could not stop watching. He needed to understand in that burning city, among the ruins of an enemy stronghold, Varen realized he had been wrong about war. He had thought it was numbers and positions and timing. He had thought it was about holding ground and wearing the other side down, but war in the hands of humanity was something else. It was alive, and it was hungry. He did not know whether to fear them or admire them. He only knew one thing. He could never again speak of war without speaking of humans. The siege had lasted 13 days and 13 nights. The enemy force ringed the human forward base with layer after layer of defenses. Towers with mounted plasma cannons stood at every approach. Invisible drones scanned the ground for movement. And every road in or out was mined with enough explosives to turn tanks into dust. Captain Varen sat in the Alliance observation shelter studying the battlefield from a safe distance. He had read of sieges before, of armies starved into surrender, of defenders slowly crushed under the weight of numbers. This was the kind of fight that no army in the galaxy had ever broken. But the humans did not seem worried. They were laughing. They moved about the base with a calm energy, checking gear, talking in low voices as if preparing for some routine training exercise. Varen noted the food stores would not last more than another week, and the enemy had already cut all supply lines. He assumed the humans would either attempt a costly breakout or request rescue from the Alliance fleet, yet neither happened that night. He was startled awake by faint movement on the monitors. Dark shapes slipped out of the base in ones and twos, vanishing into the black desert beyond the walls. At first Varen thought they were deserting, but hours later, small flashes of light began appearing in the enemy campfires one by one. The patrol drones stopped reporting. The static on the comm channels grew louder and more chaotic. By dawn, several of the enemies' forward positions were simply gone. The soldiers guarding them were nowhere to be seen. The humans returned to their base without losses, covered in dust and grinning like hunters returning from a successful chase. The following night they went out again, but this time they carried strange bundles and long spools of cable. The next morning, the enemy's supply convoy never arrived. When scouts went to investigate, they found their transport vehicles stripped of power cells, navigation units, and even wheels. The humans had taken them apart in the dark without being detected, and left the empty shells behind for the enemy to find. The psychological blow was instant. Varen could see it in the enemy movement patterns. They were no longer confident, no longer eager to attack. They were glancing over their shoulders as if expecting something to leap from the shadows on. The fifth night, Varen joined one of the human squads as an observer. They moved like liquid shadows across the sand, using the terrain as if they had been born to it. Their breathing was steady, their steps silent. When they reached the enemy perimeter, they planted small devices under the fuel tanks and on the turret mounts. Then they vanished into the darkness. Again, minutes later, the enemy camp erupted in confusion. Fires broke out, vehicles toppled, and gunfire echoed in every direction. The humans had struck without warning and were already gone by the time the defenders realized what was happening. Day after that, the siege line grew weaker. The enemy no longer attacked in force, choosing instead to huddle behind their barricades. Even the strongest fortifications could not hold if the will to fight had been shattered. Varen realized this was the humans' true weapon. They did not just defeat an enemy in battle. They erased the enemy's belief that they could win. The siege that should have lasted months collapsed in less than 2 weeks. So the final night the humans launched a full assault, but it was not a desperate charge. It was the final push of a predator cornering prey. Their strikes were precise, the explosions timed to herd the defenders into narrow kill zones. Within an hour, the encircling force had broken and scattered. Fleeing into the desert, the base gates opened, and the humans walked out, not to escape but to pursue their enemies. Into the dark, Varen followed slowly, his recorder active, catching every moment. He could hardly believe this was the same siege he had watched begin so hopelessly. The humans had not only survived, they had turned the trap inside out. When the last shot faded into silence, one of the soldiers turned to Varen and said, "We are not done yet. The next fight will not be about holding a base, it will be about sending a message." Then he walked away, leaving Varen to wonder what kind of message could possibly come after this. The message began in the quiet hours before dawn, when the enemy fleet still believed they had time to regroup and recover. Varen sat aboard a small Alliance Observation craft trailing the human strike group, he expected them to head for a supply route or a lightly defended outpost instead. Their ships moved directly toward an enemy convoy carrying wounded soldiers and surviving officers from the broken siege. The humans did not attack with overwhelming force, as Varen had seen before. They struck like surgeons, cutting out only what they wanted. The first human ship darted through the convoy's escort screen, ignoring the larger warships and heading straight for one specific transport. The escorts scrambled to intercept, but the human vessel spun and weaved between their fire like it had eyes in every direction. Two more human ships appeared from behind an asteroid field, joining the attack. Their weapons flashed once, twice, and the shields of the targeted transport collapsed. In a burst of white light, Varen expected them to destroy it, but they didn't. Instead, they disabled its engines and boarded it. Through his observation feed, Varen saw them move through the ship's corridors. Silent and focused they weren't. After prisoners or treasure, they were planting small devices in the wall's devices. Varen recognized as combat recorders. They were recording everything: the panicked faces of the enemy crew, the sound of boots echoing in the metal halls, the calm voices of humans giving orders in the middle of chaos. When the humans finally left, they took nothing with them except the recording data, and they made certain the ship's distress beacon was fully functional as the enemy ship limped away into hyperspace. The rest of the convoy scattered in fear. Varen turned to the human commander on the observation link, confused. "You could have destroyed them all," he said. The commander smiled slightly. "We didn't want to destroy them. We wanted them to tell the story." Varen frowned. "Tell who?" The commander's voice dropped. Everyone. Days later, reports flooded the Alliance news feeds. Entire enemy garrisons were abandoning their posts, not because of defeat in battle, but because of what they had heard from the survivors. The recording spread faster than any fleet could travel. Soldiers described humans appearing out of nowhere, cutting through defenses that should have been unbreakable, moving with a precision that felt inhuman. Common detail was not about the weapons or the kills, but about the way the humans looked at them. No rage, no joy, just a cold, unshakable focus, as if they were watching prey they had already decided would die. Varen began to see the effect in real time. As the human fleet advanced into new sectors, the enemy pulled back without a single shot fired. They left behind functioning bases intact, supply depots, even entire cities. Humans would arrive to find the streets empty, the surrender messages already waiting on the CUM systems. It was a war without battles, yet the humans were winning faster than ever before. But there was something unsettling about it. The enemy fear was so deep it seemed to infect everyone who heard the stories. Even some in the Alliance military spoke in quieter voices when discussing humans. Varen himself felt it in the pit of his stomach. This was no longer war as he understood it. This was a demonstration of power meant to burn itself into the memory of every soldier in the galaxy. One evening, as Varen reviewed the latest reports, a shadow crossed his desk. The human commanders stood, their helmet under one arm. "We're moving on to the capital," he said. Varen straightened. "The enemy homeworld." The commander nodded. "They think they can still negotiate. We're going to show them they can't, and when we're done, no one will forget." Varen sat back, feeling a chill. Despite the warm hum of the observation deck, he had thought the siege was the peak of human capability. He had thought the message was already sent. But if the humans considered this only the beginning, then whatever came next would change the war forever. The enemy capital hung before them like a dark jewel in the void, a sprawling world of glittering cities and heavy defense grids. Captain Varen watched from the observation deck as the human fleet approached. Without hesitation, every tactical manual in the galaxy warned against attacking a homeworld. Without overwhelming numbers and years of preparation, the enemy capital was said to be impregnable. Its orbital rings bristled with weapons. It's powerful enough to shred entire fleets before they even entered the atmosphere, yet the humans advanced in a loose formation, as if the threat barely mattered.
Ow.
Their plan did not begin with a massive barrage. Instead, small strike teams slipped away in stealth craft, disappearing into the sensor shadows. Between orbital patrol routes, Varen followed their progress on a private feed. The teams moved in silence, each assigned a different target. Power grids, communications relays, command hubs. Within hours, the capital's defense network began to flicker, and misfire anti-ship turrets went dark in whole sectors without a single shot fired. No one in the enemy command understood why. On the surface, human operatives dressed as traders and diplomats walked openly in the markets and administrative districts. They carried no visible weapons, but their eyes were always searching, mapping every street and every checkpoint. They planted hidden beacons in sewer tunnels and service shafts and left coded marks on walls that only their own forces could read. Veron realized with growing unease that they were turning the enemy's own capital into a battlefield before the first shot was fired. When the main fleet finally entered orbit, the enemy was still scrambling to restore order. The humans struck. At once, but not with brute force, their ships targeted specific government centers, cutting power to them before broadcasting messages directly into the capital's public channels. The messages were not threats, they were instructions: clear, calm, and terrifying. Lay down your arms. Go home, stay out of the streets. This is not your fight. Within minutes, parts of the city went silent as civilians obeyed. The real blow came from within. Enemy commanders began receiving conflicting orders. Some told them to defend the palace, others to retreat to the outer sectors, others to attack human landing zones. What Varen later learned was that human infiltration teams had already compromised the capital's command network, injecting false orders. That made the high command suspect each other of treachery. The more they argued, the weaker their defense became. Varen was granted clearance to follow a human ground unit into the capital. They moved like they owned the streets, stepping over rubble and abandoned weapons while enemy troops melted away into alleys. The unit leader pointed to a massive government tower ahead. "That's their war council building," he said softly. "We don't need to destroy it. We just need them to leave it and never come back." Within minutes, explosions erupted in the surrounding blocks, not to kill, but to drive the defenders outward. The humans herded them like cattle, then vanished into another sector, leaving the tower untouched, but empty by nightfall. Large sections of the capital had fallen without a single large-scale battle. Entire enemy battalions surrendered in groups. Just to avoid facing human forces directly from his vantage point on the palace steps, Varen could see the once proud capital flickering under the glow of scattered fires. The enemy's own people had begun to riot, looting food stores and turning on their leaders without their control systems. The entire world was crumbling from within. A human general stood beside Varen, watching the chaos with unreadable eyes. "You wanted to know how war ends," he said quietly. "Watch closely. This isn't about defeating their army, it's about making sure they can never fight again." Then he turned away, walking back toward the command vehicle. As fresh orders came through, Varen felt an icy realization settle over him. The humans had not come here only to win a war. They had come to break the very idea of resistance in the hearts of their enemies, and judging by what he saw in the streets of the enemy capital, that goal was already within their reach. There were no negotiations now, no offers of truce or talks of surrender. The enemy had rejected peace too many times, and the humans had decided the war would end on their terms. Captain Veron stood aboard a command observation deck as the human fleet spread across the system like a storm. Each sector of space lit up with battles, but none of them were drawn out or uncertain. They struck like hammer blows, one after another, leaving no time for the enemy to regroup. Human ground forces hit the capital's remaining strongholds with a precision that felt almost mechanical. They moved without pause, as if exhaustion simply did not exist. Entire squads fought for hours without breaking formation, leaping from street to street, building to building, while explosions rolled through the air. Varen could see the enemy's desperation in the way they fought back recklessly, throwing soldiers into hopeless defenses. The humans broke each one in minutes and kept moving, but it was not just the battles that unsettled Varen. It was the way the humans seemed to understand exactly where to hit to cause the most collapse. They destroyed bridges that connected command centers to supply zones. They cut power to shield generators seconds before an air assault struck. They spread misinformation through enemy comms, convincing entire units that they had been abandoned and needed to surrender to survive. The war was no longer a contest of strength. It was a collapse carefully crafted. In real time, Some cities did not even see a fight. The moment human forces appeared on the horizon, the defenders simply dropped their weapons and fled. The sight of the black and gray armored soldiers was enough to shatter the will to fight in. One sector Varen watched an entire battalion evacuate before a single shot was fired, leaving the gates open for the humans to walk in. He realized the stories from the captured ship in the earlier campaign had spread so deeply that the war was now half won before the humans even arrived. Everywhere they went, the humans fought not just to win, but to make a point. They left symbols on walls, they seized enemy war banners and burned them in public squares. They spoke directly to enemy civilians, telling them that the war was ending and that resistance was meaningless. This was not conquest in the old sense. This was the planting of a memory that would never fade, a memory that would make the next generation think twice before ever raising arms again. By the 5th day of the assault, the enemy's outer defenses were gone. Entire fleets either destroyed or scattered into deep space. The last loyal forces had retreated to the central palace complex where the enemy leader himself was. Rumored to be holding out, Varen expected the humans to storm it immediately, but they surrounded it instead, cutting every road and tunnel. Then they began broadcasting a single, unchanging message to the palace occupants: you have one chance, lay down your arms and walk out unarmed, or you will not walk out at all. For 2 days there was silence. Then on the 3rd day, a lone transmission reached the human command. A tired voice cracked over the comm: this is the supreme commander of our forces. We surrender, please call them off. The human general standing beside Varen said nothing at first, then turned to his officers and began issuing orders. The war was ending, but not in the way Varen had imagined. It was not just the defeat of an enemy army, it was the erasure of their will to ever stand against humans again, as the human troops moved to secure the final surrender. Varen could not shake the thought that this was what the galaxy feared most, not the human weapons, not their numbers, but the certainty with which they fought, the unshakable decision that once war had begun would not end until it was utterly finished. Varen returned to the Alliance capital, not as the confident scholar who had first set out to observe humanity's war, but as a man who had seen something that would haunt the galaxy for generations. The official celebrations had already begun. Flags flew in the streets, fleets lit up the night skies with victory patterns, and the Alliance leaders spoke proudly of unity and peace. Yet Varen could not join in the cheers because he knew what that peace had cost and what it truly meant. He submitted his final war report not to the public archives, but directly to the highest Security Council. The title was short and plain: I knew war, or so I thought. Inside, he wrote every detail, not just of the battles, but of the way humans moved thought, and decided he described how they used fear like a weapon, how they broke sieges with patience and precision, how they turned an enemy capital into its own worst enemy. He wrote of the ship they let escape to, spread the story of their strength, and how that story had ended more fights than any battle could. He told them plainly that humans did not fight as soldiers. They fought as a force of nature. As the council read the report in silence, Varen saw the unease in their eyes. Some looked as if they wanted to doubt him, to dismiss the words as exaggeration, but they had seen the same transmissions he had. They had watched the capital fall without a full-scale planetary bombardment. They had seen whole fleets surrender at the sight of a single human formation. The truth was undeniable. Humanity had not just won a war, they had changed the rules of it forever. When the meeting ended, one of the senior counselors approached Varen in private and asked him if he believed humans were dangerous to the Alliance. His answer was slow and careful: they are dangerous to anyone who pushes them too far. He explained that humans did not seek war for its own sake, but once it began, they would not stop until the enemy was broken completely. There was no middle ground, no half measure. Once unleashed, they could not be recalled, only survived. In the following weeks, the galaxy adjusted to its new reality. Former enemy worlds signed treaties faster than ever before. New trade routes opened under human escort, and no one dared threaten them. Varen noticed something else too in military academies across the Bay Alliance. Young officers now studied human tactics as part of their core training, but the lessons were spoken in hushed tones. as if even teaching them carried some risk. One evening, months later, Varan received a small encrypted packet from one of the human commanders he had traveled with. It contained only a short message. "We are preparing, the next time will come faster than anyone expects." He stared at it for a long time, knowing it was not a boast or a threat, it was a statement of fact. He closed the message, but its weight remained with him. Standing on the balcony of his residence, Varen looked out over the peaceful skyline of the Alliance capital and thought of the burning streets of the enemy world. He thought of the human soldier who had first looked at him, said, "You haven't seen anything yet." He finally understood what those words had meant to humanities. Wars did not end with victory. They ended with a warning, and that warning was now carved into the memory of the entire galaxy. Varen's final private note to himself was never sent to the archives. It was a single sentence: "May the galaxy never." Find out what happens when humanity is truly tested again.